arrogant third princess Ning Yen was actually completely defeated by Big Fool with a single sword strike. A quarter hour ago, Big Fool arrived at the secluded residence of the eldest princess Ning Jia, accompanied by Shenlang and Ning Yen. Big Fool's visit this time was to fulfill his master's instructions to have a duel with Ning Jia's disciple, Ning Yen. It turns out that after taking in Big Fool, a genius of unmatched talent, Zhongchuk couldn't contain his excitement and wrote letters boasting to all the top masters he knew, naturally including Ning Jia. At this moment, Ning Jia looked at the tall figure in front of her and asked, "Big Fool, what have you and your master learned?" Big Fool naively replied, "Haven't learned anything." Ning Jia was taken aback at first, then turned to Ning Yen and said, "Ning Yen, remember to be merciful during the duel. Don't hurt him, okay?" Ning Yen nodded seriously on the surface, but was secretly thrilled inside, thinking, Ning Yen have been exceptionally talented since childhood and have practiced martial arts for 18 years. Big Fool, who have just started, don't even know martial arts, and you want to compete with me? Watch how I humiliate you with one hand later. Soon, the two came to the training ground to prepare for the duel. However, at that moment, Big Fool looked confusedly at the sword and asked Shenlang, "Second Fool, what should I do next? My master never taught me." Shenlang was utterly frustrated. "Zhongchuk, you unreliable grandmaster, did you bring Big Fool here to fight or to provide supplies?" However, Ning Yen didn't care about that. She lifted her long sword and charged at Big Fool, but faced with such speed, Big Fool was initially stunned, then clumsily raised his heavy sword, instinctively blocked Ning Yan's attack, and directly knocked her flying out. This action left Ning Yen, still in midair, stunned. Shenlang and Ning Jia were also shocked. What just happened? After spinning around in the air for 4.5 turns, Ning Yen steadied herself but was still dazed for a long time. What did Big Fool do just now? Wasn't he supposed to have learned nothing and be incapable of anything? I must have been careless just now. This time, I must teach him a lesson properly. Thinking this, Ning Yen drew on her full strength and charged at Big Fool with her sword once more. However, Big Fool still easily sent her flying. For the always competitive Ning Yen, this was an extreme insult. Furious and on the verge of tears, Ning Yen got up and charged at Big Fool a third time. With a crisp clang, Ning Yen fell hard to the ground again, her long sword breaking, leaving only the hilt on the ground. Ning Yen was completely desperate. This was a great humiliation. After years of hard training, she couldn't beat a fool who had just started and knew nothing. The more she thought about it, the angrier Ning Yen got. She suddenly flipped up and, pointing at Big Fool, began to scold, "You big fool, you're clearly so powerful. Why play the fool to deceive this princess?" Ning Jia, however, ignored the foolish girl and went straight over to ask, "Big Fool, what have you been doing with Zhongchuk during this past half year?" Big Fool morosely replied, "Every day my master would beat me. After a whole day of beating, at night he would press me into a pot and boil me. It hurt so much when I was being boiled, and master would cry while boiling me, saying that everything he had saved for over a decade was gone." Hearing this, Ning Jia suddenly understood everything. Seeing this, Ning Yen hurriedly ran over to ask her aunt what was going on. Ning Jia explained, Zhongchuk knew that with Big Fool's intelligence, reading secret manuals was useless, so he beat Big Fool every day to train his reaction and speed, teaching him to block. As for cultivation, Big Fool is naturally of the golden bloodline. He doesn't need to cultivate. His strength and vital energy would naturally increase, but he doesn't know how to use this vital energy, making it impossible to exert it. So Zhongchuk had no choice but to use the medicinal herbs he had saved for over a decade to make medicinal baths for Big Fool to stimulate the power within him. Ning Yen was also shocked to hear this. Doesn't this mean I'm actually still very powerful? It's just that Big Fool's talent is too freakish. Isn't the appearance of such a freak unfair to other martial artists? Ning Jia didn't speak, but nodded in agreement. At this point, Ning Yen pointed at Big Fool and yelled, "You big fool, stay away from me in the future, or I'll chop off your head and kick it like a ball." Hearing Ning Yan's words, Big Fool shrank his neck and hid behind a pavilion pillar. Shenlang looked at him speechlessly and said, "Big Fool, with your timid nature, even if you become the #1 master in the world, it wouldn't be of much use." At that moment, Ning Jia called Big Fool over and took off a necklace from around her neck. After sizing him up, she put the necklace on his wrist and repeatedly admonished him to never lose it. Ning Yan looked at the necklace with jealousy in her eyes. It was a gift from the former king to her aunt, and she couldn't believe her aunt was so generous to give it to such a fool. Shenlang saw Ning Jia's intention. She wanted to tell the world that Big Fool was under the protection of the princess, and no one was to harm him. As night fell, Princess Ning Yan invited Yunmingzi, the ambassador of the Great Flame Empire, along with Shenlang and a few others to dinner. At the dinner table, Ning Yan perfunctorily introduced the three, but when introducing Shenlang, she emphasized that he was her brother. In introducing Yunmingzi, she used the term imperial trash. Yunmingzi didn't care about Ning Yan's nickname for him. All he could think was, why am I paying for a dinner that this woman organized? After the introductions, Shenlang and Yunmingzi both stood up and exchanged pleasantries insincerely. Their first impression of each other was, damn, there's actually someone as handsome as me. Absolutely not. They must be eliminated. However, the next second, the hostility between them disappeared, replaced by a familiar aura. Yes, it was the aura of jerks. At that moment, both felt as if they had known each other for ages. Shenlang and Yunmengza, both jerks, hit it off immediately and quickly became close. During their conversation, they unwittingly turned the topic to Ningyan, which annoyed Ningyan, who couldn't hear them and didn't understand what was going on. Yunmengza quietly asked Shenlang about his feelings towards Ningyan, to which Shenlang confessed that if he wasn't afraid of being castrated by the sovereign, he would have lost control long ago. Upon hearing this, Yunmengza suddenly changed his tone and said seriously, "It seems, Brother Shen, your situation was like mine initially. You haven't spent enough time with her yet. Wait a little longer, and you'll experience the process from being firm to wilting." After that, the two got together and talked a lot about techniques for flirting with girls. After the discussion, Shenlang was surprised to find out that Yunmengza had been with hundreds of women, truly earning the title of a jerk. This made Shenlang feel a deep sense of inferiority and shame for the first time. He suddenly grabbed Yunmengza's hand and said, "To find a kindred spirit in a foreign land, Brother Yun truly understands me. Would you be willing to become sworn brothers with me?" Yunmengza agreed without hesitation. From then on, Ningyan's dinner party turned into a gathering where two jerks met. These two flavorless jerks eventually became close brothers. On the way back from the dinner, Ningyan followed silently behind Shenlang. After a while, she couldn't hold back anymore and asked, "Shenlang, Yunmengza, the big but you two were talking about just now, that wasn't me, was it?" Shenlang was shocked. It had been so long. How had she not forgotten? Ningyan noticed the corner of Shenlang's clothes and seemed to understand everything. At that moment, she lowered her eyebrows, said nothing, and suddenly drew her sword from her waist. Before Shenlang could react, she swung it fiercely at him. However, Big Fool, who was very protective of Shenlang, blocked Ningyan with his large sword at lightning speed. This action completely unleashed the long-suppressed anger in Ningyan, and she continuously swung her sword at the two. But such speed was clearly not enough for Big Fool. He not only easily blocked the attacks, but also naively tried to calm Ningyan down. It wasn't until Ningyan was out of breath and could no longer swing her arms that she stopped. Damn it, she couldn't beat Big Fool in a fight, and she couldn't outsmart Shenlang. At that moment, Ningyan completely broke down and cried out, "Shenlang, you wait for me. Once Big Fool is gone, I'm going to beat the crap out of you." After yelling, she turned and left angrily. In the stunned Shenlang, still reflecting on Ningyan's crude behavior, Brother Yun is really something. My feelings for Ningyan seem to have already entered the so-called second stage. The next day at the Market Street Junction, the Chan people who had burned the holy temple knelt in unison on the high platform. At the command of the eunuch, the executioners raised their butcher knives and directly beheaded the Chan people. As heads fell and blood splattered, the cheers and support for the king from the officials and the public below continued non-stop for a long time. However, when the sovereign requested the formation of a delegation to condemn the Chan king, 80% of the officials in charge of vassal state affairs feigned illness and stayed home. They knew that this mission was likely a death sentence, and they would rather be dismissed from their posts than go to their deaths. At this critical moment, the actor Shenlang made a grand entrance, volunteering to represent the Yu Kingdom and go to the Chan country. He promised to complete the mission and make the Chan king personally write a confession, giving a satisfactory explanation to all the people. A day later, the news of Shenlang's mission to the Chan country spread throughout the Yu Kingdom. That day, the sovereign decreed to grant Shenlang a leisurely official position of a 7th grade rank, fulfilling one of his wishes. Soon after, Shenlang received a reply from a spy. Just a month ago, a smallpox epidemic had broken out in Chan country, infecting 1/5 of the nation. The brutal Chan king chose to kill tens of thousands of infected people and bury them on the spot. Even as the Chan king himself trembled with fear, the epidemic was not controlled but worsened. At this time, the Chan king was desperate. If his people continued to die like this, the Chan country would be completely destroyed. Having understood the intelligence, Shenlang felt great joy. It was time to employ his expertise again. It was as if even heaven was on his side. 2 days later, the sovereign's decree arrived, and that evening, another piece of good news came. Little Bing was pregnant. The continuous good news boosted Shenlang's confidence in his journey even more. The next morning, Princess Ningyan, accompanied by 100 knights, escorted Shenlang grandly out of the capital city. Along the way, Ningyan tried to encourage Shenlang. "Shenlang, go with peace of mind. If you die, I will take good care of little Bing for you." As soon as she said this, not only did Shenlang grin, but even Shen 13 cursed inwardly. This brainless princess should just keep her mouth shut. Unexpectedly, Ningyan added another remark. "Shenlang, haven't you always wanted to sleep with me? If you come back alive this time, I'll let you sleep with me. How about that?" Upon hearing this, Shenlang was petrified. "Ningyan, speak up a bit louder, and your dad will come chop me up. I think, sooner or later, if I don't die at the hands of an enemy, I'll die at the hands of you, my dear." In the territory of Chan country, at the top of a snow mountain, a mysterious and unparalleled beauty stood like a fairy, overlooking her disciples sneaking away below the mountain. At that moment, the voice of Big Fool's master, Zhong Chuk, suddenly rang out from behind her. "Sister Shuayin, I didn't expect that after 20 years, you are still as young and beautiful." Indeed, this beautiful woman was Shuayin, one of the world's top martial arts grandmasters. Shuayin chuckled lightly and said, "Brother Zhong, it seems you have aged quite a bit in these 20 years. Zhongchuk did not respond to her comment but walked up to her and asked, "Didn't we agree that your disciple was to meet Big Fool for a matchmaking? Why did you let her leave?" Xueyin looked down at the figure below the mountain and with a tender look slowly said, "When fate arrives, they will naturally come together. Why should we arrange it deliberately? Moreover, my time is near, and I don't want this child to see me die." Zhongchuk became anxious and hurriedly said, "Sister, I know a very talented young man. His medical skills are quite remarkable. Why not come down the mountain with me? Maybe he could save you." Xueyin shook her head. "No need. My condition is terminal, and it's just a matter of a dozen days now." Zhongchuk wanted to say more, but Xueyin interrupted him. "It's good for me to depart this way. Perhaps after I am gone, we can find the truth behind the mysteries we have been seeking for decades. It might also let me know the true cause of that sudden death." Meanwhile, at the foot of the snowy mountain, a tall and robust woman stood quietly. She was leading a white ox down the mountain, and she is Master Xueyin's disciple who sneaked out, the princess of Chang country, Arunana, also the matchmaking candidate mentioned by them for Big Fool. At this moment, as she walked, she complained that her master had arranged a match for her behind her back. As the strongest female warrior of the Chang country, down on those weak and ineffectual men. Recalling the past, she was already 1.7 meters tall at the age of 8 and possessed incredible strength. By the age of 15, she had grown to 1.9 meters. Back then, she was powerful and ruthless, a killer feared throughout the Chang country, known as the Hell Princess. 10 years ago, after experiencing a great battle, she came to the desert and met Xueyin. Xueyin told her that her murderous aura was too strong, and if not properly managed, she might not live past 30. Upon hearing someone curse her in such a way, Arunana flew into a rage, grabbing her broadsword to strike at Xueyin. However, with just a quick movement, Xueyin had her kneeling on the ground. From that moment, she was subdued by Xueyin and became the master's last disciple. Although she had intended to stay by Xueyin's side, upon learning that her master had arranged a fiancé for her, she could no longer sit still. Yet she dared not defy her master's orders, and unable to defeat her, she could only drug her master with a sleeping potion and sneak away. But how could she have anticipated that a grandmaster like Xueyin would be easily subdued by a sleeping potion? The scene shifts to the palace of the Chang King, where a rough roar echoes through the entire palace as Chang King Arugan is seen furiously shouting, "You kingdom dares to kill my Chang country's envoys. This is a blatant provocation. We must go to war." It turns out that shortly after Arunana had returned to Chang country, a confidant of Sunan also arrived in Chang country and informed the Chang King that the Chang delegation had been sanctioned. This matter all started because of one person. "If we are to go to war, we must kill this person first, or there will be endless troubles," he said, then opened a wooden box beside him. "This is 100,000 gold coins." Also Sunan's gesture to appease the anger of Chang King. As expected, upon seeing the boxes of gold coins, the Chang King's tone indeed softened a lot. "Speak. Who is the person you want to kill?" Sunan's confidant directly stated, "This person is you kingdom's new envoy, Shenlang. If he is killed, the Su family is willing to add another 100,000 gold coins as a reward for the king." As the words fell, a loud thud was heard as the stone stool beside the throne was shattered by a punch from the Chang King. "But we must not only kill this vermin, we must also continue to send troops to attack you kingdom." At that moment, Arunana stepped forward and said, "Father, since you kingdom killed our envoys, we should do the same and kill their entire delegation, especially that Shenlang, who must be chopped up and fed to the dogs. I am willing to personally lead our troops into battle." Meanwhile, Shenlang and his group, carrying the heads of Chang people, had been traveling through the desert for over 10 days and were gradually nearing Chang country. They were finally about to arrive in Chang country. Along the way, Shenlang often lifted the carriage curtain and could see Shen 13 blushing as he looked in someone's direction. Seeing this, Shenlang felt a surge of speechlessness inside. 13, you little guy, something's going on with you. Wang Feng is my man. Shenlangs, I never expected your first crush to be of such a strong taste. Suddenly, a cloud of dust rose not far ahead, and a troop of Chang cavalry charged directly towards them. Leading them was Arunana herself. In just a moment, they had completely surrounded Shenlang and his group. Seeing this, Shen 13 hurriedly shared Arunana's identity information with Shenlang. Shenlang immediately understood, so this is the fiancé of Big Fool that Zhongchuk mentioned. At that moment, Arunana rode forward on her draft ox and coldly asked, "Are you the delegation from Yu Kingdom? Are you the envoy, Shenlang?" Standing on the carriage, Shenlang smiled and replied, "I am indeed Shenlang. I presume you must be Princess Arunana of Chang country." However, upon hearing this, Arunana shouted loudly and ordered an attack. "All commanders, take them down, flay and dismember the Shenlang and feed him to the dogs." Seeing this, Shenlang quickly pointed to Big Fool and shouted, "Please wait, your highness. We are all on the same side here. Look quickly, this tall fellow by my side is your husband." Hearing this, Arunana suddenly froze in place. When she looked at Big Fool, she exclaimed in surprise, "My God, is he really the matchmaking candidate my master introduced? This man is even taller and stronger than I am." Upon seeing Arunana, Big Fool's heart uncontrollably started racing. This woman is so tall and strong, absolutely beautiful. Could this be the wife of Big Fool for life? Seeing Big Fool dazed, Shenlang quickly stepped forward and urged, Big Fool, aren't you going to greet your future wife? At that moment, Arunana also raised her hand to signal all the cavalry to stop their attack. Big Fool happily walked up to Arunana, grinning foolishly at her. Seeing this, Arunana, somewhat resigned, took the initiative to speak and asked if he was Zhongchuk's disciple. Big Fool pointed at himself and replied, I am the master's last disciple. Are you also closing doors for your master every day? Hearing Big Fool's response, Arunana was completely speechless. This really is a fool. Shenlang whispered to Big Fool, tell the princess you are here for the matchmaking. Say you like her a lot, want to marry her, sleep with her, and have children with her. Following Shenlang's advice, Big Fool directly told Arunana, I am here to marry you and take you home. I want to sleep with you and have children with you. Upon hearing this, everyone burst into laughter. The originally tense atmosphere had completely dissipated, but the next second, everyone covered their mouths, no longer daring to laugh because they felt that their princess was getting angry. At that moment, Arunana swung her sword towards Big Fool and said, if you want to marry me, then take my 3 strikes. If you survive after 3 strikes, I will give you a chance. How about that? Hearing this, Shenlang was very excited and immediately urged Big Fool to step forward and accept the challenge. After all, Big Fool might lack other skills, but his blocking and defense were definitely the strongest. Quickly, Arunana took her stance, ready to launch an attack on Big Fool. She swung her 100-pound crescent blade furiously at Big Fool, her speed astonishing. At the moment of the weapon's collision, a loud noise erupted, and in a flash, Big Fool's body trembled violently, causing the ground within 10 meters of him to crack open. Shenlang and the others were stunned. She's incredibly strong, much more so than that silly girl Ning Yen. Arunana continued to gather strength for her second move. She swung her crescent blade like a whirlwind rising from the ground, and in the instant she slashed horizontally. Big Fool again raised his weapon to block her attack, his feet sinking deeper into the ground. At this moment, even Big Fool felt the strain, as this was the first time he had encountered such great force. Arunana was also shocked. She hadn't expected Big Fool to block her 2 strikes, considering that even the strongest warrior of the Chan, Crown Prince Urutai, had only managed to block one of her moves. Big Fool's formidable strength truly ignited Arunana's competitive spirit. For her final attack, she unleashed her ultimate move, the blazing fire blade, driving the blade to intense heat with powerful inner strength. While Big Fool was distracted, Arunana swiftly swung her blade. The strong intent to kill snapped Big Fool back to reality, and he instinctively blocked the lethal strike with his weapon. However, Arunana did not stop. She intensified the inner strength at the blade's tip, pushing Big Fool back several meters. The powerful force from both sides even blasted a D10 meters in diameter into the ground beneath them. The battle finally ended, but the energy from the blazing fire blade was so intense that it heated Big Fool's heavy sword as hot as a branding iron, also causing his hands to tear open, blood uncontrollably flowing out. Seeing the blood spilling from his mouth, it was clear he had also suffered internal injuries. Shenlang, not knowing martial arts, was only excited that Big Fool had won over Arunana, while Shen 13 was utterly shocked by their power levels. Too strong. Is such formidable power really possible for humans? At this moment, Arunana put down her crescent blade and said, a bet is a bet, Big Fool. We can now proceed with our matchmaking. Upon hearing this, Big Fool was overjoyed, ignoring his wounds, and naively asked, can we really do it now? Second Fool said matchmaking means getting married, then sleeping together and having children, but I don't know how. However, Arunana simply ignored his question and started introducing herself. Big Fool also hurriedly introduced himself properly. Seeing this, Shenlang was very pleased. Isn't this a good start? It seems these two really hit it off. However, unexpectedly, Arunana then straightforwardly said, the matchmaking session is over now. I'm not interested in you. You can leave. Shenlang was dumbfounded. What's going on? Weren't the two of them getting along well just now? How can she dismiss our Big Fool without even asking anything? At that moment, Arunana's expression suddenly changed. She lifted her crescent blade and shouted loudly, You Kingdom dared to kill my Chan country's envoys. Warriors, exterminate the You Kingdom delegation and avenge our people. Shenlang was shocked. Damn, how can this woman turn her face so quickly? Helplessly, he had to use his second life-saving tactic and shouted loudly, Your Highness, I can cure smallpox for you and avert the danger of your country's extinction. However, Arunana didn't believe Shenlang's claim at all, as over the past few days, dozens of charlatans claiming they could cure smallpox had died by her blade. At this critical moment, Big Fool once again stood in front of Shenlang and took the blade for him. At this, Arunana became furious and shouted at those behind her, What are you waiting for? Charge at them. Hearing the princess's command, all the knights charged at the You Kingdom delegation like warriors injected with adrenaline. Charging toward Shenlang and his group, Shenlang was also scared. He hadn't expected this woman to be so fierce. Although they had brought elite warriors, the soldiers of the Chan country were all incredibly robust and clearly outmatched them. At that moment, he suddenly remembered that a Grandmaster level figure was following them. It must be Zhongchuk who was following them because he was concerned about Big Fool. Thinking of this, he stood up and shouted to the sky, "Grandmaster, I know you've followed us all the way. Show yourself now. If you don't appear, we're all done for." However, as his words fell, aside from the shouting of soldiers behind him, there was still no sign of Zhongchuk. Just when Shenlang thought he had miscalculated, a captivating fragrance wafted past him. Shenlang was stunned. If it's not Zhongchuk, then what is this strange scent? Before he could react, a figure with an ethereal aura landed in front of the carriage. "Stop fighting now." Seeing the person before her, Arunana was instantly panic-stricken and hurriedly ordered the cavalry to stop the attack. "Why has Master come? Did she find out that I drugged her?" Meanwhile, Shenlang was mesmerized by the gentle voice. Could this beauty be Grandmaster Xueyin? She should be older. Could she be a siren with a youthful voice? At that moment, Xueyin slowly turned around to face Shenlang and asked, "Shenlang, can you truly cure the smallpox in Chan country?" Shenlang quickly composed himself, bowed respectfully, and said, "Yes, Grandmaster, I indeed have a way. I am confident that I can cure the smallpox and save countless lives in Chan country." Hearing his answer, Xueyin sighed helplessly. "There's no other way. I must take you to see the Chan king now." The reason Xueyin was so melancholic was because the Chan king's obsession with her had reached a fanatic level, and she always wore a veil because her beauty was so breathtaking that any man who saw her true face would be utterly captivated. Even Zhongchuk had vowed to remain unmarried for her. Thinking of this, Xueyin sighed again, then turned and said, "Follow me to meet the Chan king. I can ensure your safety." After saying this, she no longer paid attention to the others and walked toward the city on her own. Shenlang called out from behind her, "Thank you, Fairy Auntie, for your help." Arunana, realizing that her master had not come because of the drugging incident, breathed a sigh of relief. But hearing Shenlang's reference to her master, she flared up again. "You know my master, and you call her Auntie? You really are a shameless pretty boy." Shenlang thought to himself, "I was already being restrained. I originally wanted to call her sister." After this harrowing yet unscathed battle, Shenlang and his group finally entered the city of Chan country. The smallpox situation in Chan country was severe. Along the way into the city, there were bodies lying everywhere. Seeing this tragic scene, Shenlang couldn't help but frown. These barbarians really don't care about hygiene. No wonder the epidemic has gotten so severe in such an environment. Moments later, under Aranana's lead, Big Fool followed Shenlang into the royal palace to meet the Chan king. At that moment, Arunana, who harbored resentment against Shenlang, suddenly shouted into the inner chamber, "The pretty boy envoy from Yu Kingdom is here. If you don't want to see him, I'll just kill him right now." Hearing this, Shenlang felt dissatisfied and started complaining to Big Fool. "Big Fool, can't even control your own wife, and she's calling for my head." However, he stopped mid-sentence as he realized that Big Fool, being smitten with love, was completely mesmerized by Arunana. A moment later, at the signal from the Chan king, Arunana led the two into the inner chamber. Although Shenlang was usually slick with words, he never skimped on proper etiquette. After bowing to the Chan king, his eyes stealthily surveyed the king before him. It must be said, the Chan king was indeed as imposing and domineering as rumored. His mere presence felt oppressive. You could feel the aura of wanton killing energy around him. It seems like Aranana's temperament was indeed inherited from this tyrant. Faced with such a king, Shenlang decided to cut straight to the chase and said, "Your Majesty, Shenlang can cure the smallpox outbreak in Chan country and have the capability to save your tens of thousands of subjects." However, as soon as he finished speaking, the Chan king said impatiently, "There's no need. Someone has already successfully cured my youngest son of smallpox." Shenlang was shocked, thinking how could someone have cured smallpox before him? Given the current medical technology, it was impossible to cure this disease. At that moment, a sinister voice emerged from the Chan king. "Su Nan sent word to me that it was you who schemed to have my Chan envoys burn the Yu Kingdom's sacred temple and then had the king of Yu execute them. Is this true? You only have one chance to answer this question, so think carefully before you reply." Shenlang, without any hesitation, admitted, "Yes, I was indeed behind those actions." Hearing such a straightforward response from Shenlang, the Chan king actually gained a new respect for him. But the next second, he continued, "Since you've admitted it, I will honor the promise to the divine Xueyin not to kill you." However, the Chan king snapped his fingers and continued, "You need to make a choice among them." Before Shenlang could react, two guards brought in Shen 13 and Huang Feng. The Chan king sneered, "You must choose between them. Although I promised Xueyin I wouldn't kill you, the death of so many of my people cannot go unavenged. It's hard to ease the hatred in my heart. You can choose one of your subordinates to live, and the other I will chop up and feed to the dogs." Hearing the Chan king's threat, Shen 13 and Huang Feng immediately started pleading with Shenlang to choose them to die. Shen 13 knelt down and begged, "Master, let it be me. Please ensure Huang Feng lives. I am already a man close to death, and I have been very honored to follow you these past 6 months." Seeing this, Huang Feng also became anxious. "Shenlang, don't listen to Shen 13. I've had enough of being by your side. If you let me die, I'll finally be at peace." Faced with the two men competing to sacrifice themselves, Shenlang felt conflicted. You two really share a deep bond. Who would believe there's no personal affection? The Chan king grew impatient. "Enough, since you can't decide. I'll have them both killed and fed to the dogs." He then ordered the guards to drag the two away. Seeing this, Shenlang immediately turned around and said, "Your Majesty, Majesty, I would like to exchange a treasure for the lives of my 2 subordinates. He then had Big Fool bring in a large wooden box. Your Majesty, please look. I believe this treasure will definitely please you. As Shenlang said, the Chan King's eyes widened when he saw the treasure inside the box. It was a 1-meter-tall piece of imperial green jade carved into the likeness of the Chan King himself. The treasure thrilled the Chan King so much that he held it in his hands, overjoyed. As is known, imperial green jade of the glass type has always been a rare gemstone. A palm-sized piece can fetch an astronomical price. To possess such a large piece now is truly invaluable. But the Chan King was a greedy villain. Down and said, this treasure is indeed excellent, but it can only save one person. The other must still die. Shenlang cursed inwardly. I knew this bastard wouldn't compromise so easily. Thankfully, I used glass, not real jade. It would have been a huge loss to give real jade to this fool. But fortunately, I have another trick up my sleeve. With this in mind, Shenlang continued, please hold your judgment for a moment. Your Majesty, this is no ordinary jade. Please order the candles to be extinguished and the curtains drawn to see its effect. Moments later, in the darkened great hall, the jade sculpture emitted a blinding light, completely astounding the Chan King. It's known that the largest luminous pearls are only as big as a baby's fist, yet this imperial green jade sculpture could emit such dazzling light. This treasure can truly become a national treasure of my Chan country. Suppressing the joy in his heart, the Chan King turned and immediately ordered the release of Shen 13 and Huang Feng, and had the guards take the treasure to his national treasury. Seeing this, Shenlang breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that he had prepared in advance and figured out the Chan King's preferences. He not only used green glass to make a fake jade sculpture, but also coated it with phosphorescent powder, or his 2 subordinates would have truly been doomed. Shenlang continued, Your Majesty, I have a second gift for you. Now that the jade sculpture had set the stage, the Chan King was even more eager upon hearing about a second gift. Shenlang took a wooden box and opened it to reveal dozens of items familiar to everyone. Yes, they were cigarettes. Next, Shenlang lit one and took a deep breath to explain. This is a cigarette made from nicotiana grass mixed with various spices, which is 100 times better than the tobacco of old. It revitalizes the spirit and is said to cure all diseases. Of course, Shenlang wouldn't tell the Chan King that the reason it could invigorate people was due to the special ingredients he had added. The Chan King picked up a cigarette and sniffed. It does smell quite unique, and rolling up the nicotiana grass and sucking it with the mouth is quite interesting. Watching every move of the Chan King, Shenlang inwardly marveled at his strong sense of caution. Despite his evident desire to try it, he still managed to restrain his urge. However, this was also good, as they could now directly move on to discuss serious matters. Shenlang had hoped to become the savior of Chan country by curing the smallpox epidemic. To his surprise, he learned from the Chan King that someone had already arrived in Chan country before him with a treatment for smallpox. Shenlang was greatly shocked by this, knowing that with current medical technology, it was impossible to cure smallpox, which could only be overcome by the body's immune system. In the famously known New Kingdom of the East, the mortality rate from smallpox was extremely high in the past, about 1/3 of the total population, and in Chan country, with such poor sanitary conditions, the mortality rate could reach as high as 60 to 70%. It's due to various complications caused by smallpox infections. If someone claims they can cure the smallpox, they are likely just sedating the patients to prevent them from scratching their skin, waiting for a few days until the pustules crust and fall off to survive. Having analyzed the other party's methods, Shenlang directly said, Chan King, in my view, this person must be a charlatan. If I'm not mistaken, the reason the young prince didn't show severe symptoms is because he has been asleep, and he inherited your strong constitution, which allowed him to survive smallpox through natural recovery. However, the Chan King's heart remained unmoved after hearing this. He was a barbarian. How could he understand what Shenlang was saying? He simply stated, regardless, since this person has already cured the young prince, he will be my royal physician from now on. As for you, I promised the goddess Shui not to kill you, and since I've accepted your gift, I will also allow your 2 subordinates to leave. The Chan King's expression suddenly darkened. But I will have all the people you brought with you killed. Only by doing so can I restore the face of my Chan country. Shenlang was shocked, inwardly cursing the Chan King as a madman. In an attempt to salvage the situation, he said, Your Majesty, I am certain that person is a fraud. You can summon him for a confrontation. I have evidence that can expose his lies. The more the Chan King listened, the angrier he became, shouting directly, This man is my benefactor. If you speak ill of him again, I will rip out your tongue. Although I promised not to kill you, I can also choose not to let you go. You will stay in Chan country and become a slave, at the mercy of others. Hearing the Chan King's words, Shenlang felt a bad premonition. Something is wrong. The Chan King is a tyrannical and selfish man. He would not keep that person as his personal physician just because he cured the young prince. There must be something I don't know. Just then, a familiar scent wafted into his nostrils. A Taoist with a sly and rat-like appearance came forward. Zwaboyu, or recluse, greet the Chan King and see Master Shen. Seeing this person, Shenlang frowned. This was a master player. Knowing the Chan King's obsession with Grandmaster Shuayin, he had concocted a similar scent to wear on on himself to win favor. Though there were some discrepancies, it had seemingly worked. Suddenly, for some reason, Shenlang sensed something familiar about this man's face. So, he activated his mental processor to run a match, and sure enough, he found a similar person. It was Shu Tingyu from the Hidden Origin Society. The two had different physiques, suggesting that they might either be biological brothers or cousins. Why would the Hidden Origin Society send someone to Cham country? What is their purpose? After some thought, Shenlang asked, Mr. Zhua, I hear it was you who cured the young prince. Suoboyo humbly replied, not at all. It is all the grace of heaven. The young prince is fortunate, and I dare not claim the work of the divine. After hearing this, Shenlang fell silent. This man had presented himself so humbly. His display of having no desires could indeed make people willingly trust him. At that moment, Shenlang suddenly remembered some intelligence he had received. The Chan King had raided the western regions 2 months ago but had returned home before completing his mission. Given his notorious indulgence in women, could it be that he contracted some unmentionable disease? And was it then cured by this Suoboyu? If that was the case, everything would make sense. Thinking this, he then asked, was it you who cured the Chan King of his serious illness? Hearing this, Suoboyu quickly responded, nonsense. His Majesty the Chan King is as strong as a mountain and protected by the gods. How could he have even a slight illness? But I hear, Master Shen, that you are very adept with poisons. The Chan King was startled and said, what do you mean by that, Taoist? Suoboyu, looking at Shenlang, explained, I have heard that Master Shen used poison to kill the entire family of Peaceful Stability Count's mansion. Hundreds of people, and even Pirate King Qiu Tianwei and his tens of thousands of pirates died by your hand. These accounts are not false. Damn, Shenlang thought. Not only had he failed to expose this fraud, but he had also been outmaneuvered. It seemed this guy was trying to make the Chan King wary of me, in order to eliminate me. But then again, this cunning old Taoist would never expect that I've already caught onto his scheme. Subsequently, Shenlang directly said, Chan King, this Suoboyu has been plotting treachery and has seduced your queen. It is a fact. I urge you to investigate the truth and have him torn to pieces. Upon hearing this, both the Chan King and Suoboyu were stunned. What's going on? How did it escalate to adultery? Quickly, Suoboyu regained his composure and retorted, Your Majesty, it's one thing for Shenlang to slander me, but to speak such defamatory words about the queen is a blatant insult to you. Shenlang sneered, do you think I would make such claims without evidence? Your Majesty, Chan King, simply strip him of his clothes and you will see the truth of my words. At this point, Suoboyu truly began to panic. I am a man of cultivation. How can I endure such humiliation to disrobe in public? This is utterly preposterous. Shenlang scoffed and did not reply. He had already detected something suspicious when he scanned Suoboyu earlier. The man was wearing a silk undergarment close to his skin, embroidered with a love poem in gold thread, and most crucially, signed with the queen's name. The Chan King said with a cold face, Taoist Sua, please disrobe quickly to prove your innocence. By now, Suoboyu was so frightened that his legs were weak, and he was babbling various refusals. Seeing this, the Chan King stepped forward and ripped off his Taoist robe. Instantly, Suoboyu's undergarment with the love poem was exposed to everyone. The Chan King became furious on the spot. His favorite concubine's name was Luo Yin. Even with his limited literacy, he could tell that this was a love poem between the two. He then grabbed Suoboyu and shouted, You wretched Taoist, daring to have an affair right in front of me. Do you not fear death? At this critical moment, Suoboyu cried out, Your Majesty, actually, Luo Yin and I are long-lost siblings. The reason I went to such lengths to save the young prince is because he is my nephew. Upon hearing this, Shenlang was dumbfounded. Damn, Suoboyu, could your explanation be any more absurd? Do you think we're all idiots? This statement made the Chan King hesitate, but he soon shouted, Bring Luo Yin to me. A seductive and graceful woman then entered. Undeniably, this queen named Luo Yin was extremely beautiful. Shenlang wondered how her delicate body could withstand the Chan King's brutality. When Luo Yin entered and saw Suoboyu lying on the ground, she ran over excitedly. Has the king found out about us? Seeing this, Shenlang wanted to mock their poor acting skills further, but the next second, he was shocked by the results from his mental processor. Unexpectedly, aside from their differing appearances, their bone structures were remarkably similar. This could only mean that they were indeed siblings, but this also implied that the Hidden Origin Society deliberately placed a woman by the Chan King's side, considering the files stated that Luo Yin was a woman the Chan King had captured during a raid in a foreign country, and it was a setup by the Hidden Origin Society at that time. The capabilities of the people behind the Hidden Origin Society were not to be underestimated. At this moment, Suoboyu and Luo Yin were still prostrate on the ground, tearfully explaining to the Chan King the necessity of concealing their relationship. Luo Yin mournfully said, Several years ago, His Majesty took a liking to me and brought me back to Chan country. My family, including my elder brother, never stopped looking for me over the years. It so happened that my brother's medical skills were extraordinary, and fortunate to be esteemed by His Majesty, he was brought into the palace, and we were reunited. However, I dared not recognize him openly and asked him to serve well by His Majesty's side. The wise king, you still discovered us. After hearing this, Shenlang sneered and squatted in front of them. Well said. Your bone structures are indeed similar, but that doesn't necessarily mean you are full siblings. You could be cousins. If you are cousins, then the poem on the underwear can prove your relationship. However, before Shenlang could finish, Luo Yan interrupted him. Don't slander us. This poem is clearly about missing my family, meaning I have family yet cannot acknowledge them because I already have a lover and children here. Saying this, Luo Yan covered her face and cried again, sorrowful for not being able to reunite with her parents. This explanation left Shenlang unable to refute. This poem could be interpreted as romantic love or familial affection, just like this poem, which could be interpreted as romantic love or familial affection. At that moment, Luo Yan suddenly stood up. Your Majesty, I have evidence that can prove my innocence. Suddenly, Luo Yan rose to her feet and, in front of everyone, lifted her skirt. This action frightened Shenlang so much that he quickly turned his face away, cursing inwardly, this woman is really bold. Knowing the Chan King's strong possessiveness, if Shenlang were to look at Luo Yan's body, the Chan King would definitely kill him. Luo Yan cried out, Your Majesty, you must recognize the unique set of 3 red moles on my leg. My brother has them too, only his are on the left side. Hearing this, Zwaboyu quickly stood up and lifted his robe, revealing the same 3 red moles on his left thigh. Seeing this, Shenlang frowned, finding himself in a difficult position. As a doctor, he could tell at a glance that the moles were artificially made, but the Chan King wouldn't know this, and he probably already believed 80% that these two were siblings. While Shenlang was contemplating his next move, Luo Yan suddenly shouted, Master Shen, how did you know my brother was wearing the silk undergarment I embroidered? Moreover, I heard that the burning of the Yu Kingdom's sacred temple by Chan envoys, resulting in their deaths, was all your conspiracy. Now that you've come here, you start inciting various suspicions. Are you trying to harm more people from Chan country? With these words, the Chan King's attention was indeed shifted to Shenlang, and he said with a stern face, Shenlang, if you cannot explain your involvement in the murder of my Chan envoys, then don't expect to leave here alive. Hearing the Chan King's words, Shenlang couldn't help but curse internally. You turn on people faster than flipping through a book. Just accepted a gift and now you're ready to kill me, truly without any bottom line. Such a ruthless wolf without limits is a danger that must be dealt with swiftly. With this thought, Shenlang directly said, Chan King, my actions were actually aimed at dealing with the Su family. Afterwards, it will be our Jin family taking over. Whether it's the foreign affairs between Chan country and Yu Kingdom, our Jin family can handle them properly. Moreover, I can promise you, if you cooperate with us, not only will we offer the same tributes as the Su family, but we will also add an extra 100,000 gold coins each year. What do you think of this proposal? Hearing such a tempting offer, the Chan King's eyes suddenly lit up, but then he calmed down and said, why should I believe you? The Su family is much more powerful than your Jin family. Shenlang chuckled coldly after hearing this. Is that so? Big fool, bring in our treasure. As his words fell, Big Fool came in carrying a large object wrapped in cloth. As the cloth was unveiled, under the refraction of the sunlight, a dazzling light instantly illuminated the entire hall. Amid everyone's shock, Shenlang continued, this glass mirror is a treasure from our Jin family. It has become popular throughout the East. The Heavenly Path Society, with whom we've partnered, has regained the strategic initiative in trade between the Eastern and Western countries. Each mirror is sold only at auctions, fetching sky-high prices. Of course, the Chan King knew about this. To date, the largest mirror in the auction was no more than 6 feet, but the mirror in front of them now exceeded the size of the largest mirror ever auctioned. Shenlang continued, Your Majesty, do you now believe that our Jin family has the capability to replace the Su family? No sooner had the words left his mouth than the Chan King ordered directly, take the mirror, detain Shenlang and the others, and force the Jin family to tribute 1,000 mirrors to me each year. At this time, although the Chan King believed the sibling relationship between Zwaboyu and Luo Yan, he did not trust their innocence. After all, incestuous relationships between siblings are not uncommon in Chan country. Sensing the Chan King's ruthless gaze, Zwaboyu quickly said, Your Majesty, I can treat smallpox. If you punish me, who will treat your royal family if they fall ill again? Hearing this, Shenlang knew the time was right and immediately stepped forward, saying, I can take care of the illness. Zwaboyu, seeing Shenlang trying to undermine him, became greatly annoyed and pointed at Shenlang, shouting, this is playing with the lives of the royal family. I am the only one with the divine medicine for treating smallpox. Shenlang is nothing but a blatant fraudster. As the two argued incessantly, a guard ran in, desperate, Your Majesty, it's terrible. The third Prince Aruhan has developed pox and been infected with smallpox. Then another guard rushed in, Your Majesty, Princess Arunana has also started showing symptoms. Upon hearing this news, the Chan King's face turned ashen. Third Prince Aruhan was his most beloved son, and not to mention Arunana, she was absolutely the apple of his eye. As the Chan King was extremely anxious, Zwaboyu immediately stepped forward and said, I still have 1 dose of the divine medicine left, and I have the ability to cure the third prince overnight. Since Shenlang claims he can treat smallpox, let him cure the princess to prove it to you. How about that? At this moment, Shenlang finally understood. He had thought that Zwaboyu had merely sedated the young prince to help him survive smallpox through sleep, but it turned out this was just chickenpox concocted by him and Luo Yan, and his current choice to treat the third prince definitely suggested a problem. It was likely that this man had carefully fabricated a skin disease with symptoms identical to smallpox. As for Arunana, it must be that someone schemed deliberately to infect her with smallpox, possibly for ulterior motives behind her return. It seems someone's path was being blocked, intending to put her in a deadly situation. At that moment, Big Fool, upon hearing that Arunana had contracted smallpox, became utterly distraught, continuously shouting Arunana's name. He suddenly turned and ran outside, not forgetting to shout at Shenlang as he left, "Second fool, hurry up and find a way to save my wife." Meanwhile, outside the palace, due to the young prince contracting smallpox, 2 airtight isolation rooms had been specially constructed. Third Prince Aruhan and Arunana were each lying in one of these rooms, separated only by a thin wall. Under the Chan King's lead, Shenlang arrived at Arunana's isolation room, where he saw Big Fool sitting beside her bed, looking distressed. By this time, her face had already begun to show dense clusters of smallpox. Seeing Big Fool arrive, she mustered her strength despite feeling unwell, and angrily told him to leave immediately. "Are you mad? Everyone else is avoiding me, and you're coming closer instead. Aren't you afraid of getting infected?" But far from leaving, Big Fool instead softly comforted her. "Wife, don't be scared. I'm here with you. My brother Second Fool is very skilled. He will make sure nothing happens to you." It was this very sentence that deeply moved Arunana, also comforting the fear in her heart. At that moment, Arunana realized that she too longed for a strong man to rely on. Big Fool's willingness to risk his life to stay by her side touched her deeply. Perhaps he really was the person she needed. With this thought, she took Big Fool's hand, and her tone softened. "Fool, but if you get infected, don't blame me." Standing at the door, Shenlang knew that Big Fool's romantic matters were now settled. Of course, he wasn't worried about Big Fool getting infected because he had vaccinated everyone before coming to Chan Country. Seeing that Arunana was not in serious trouble, Shenlang then returned to the outside of the isolation room. At that moment, Swaboyu was making an oath to the Chan King. "Your Majesty, if I cure the third prince by tomorrow morning, please let me stay to continue protecting the royal family. If I fail, you may do with me as you will, even if it means cutting me into 1,000 pieces." Looking back at Shenlang, Swaboyu continued, "Of course, if the third prince recovers tomorrow, that will prove that Shenlang is superfluous. Please, Your Majesty, completely eliminate him." After saying this, he turned and walked towards the third prince's isolation room, yet Shenlang just stood there, with no apparent intention of doing anything. The Chan King, both annoyed and puzzled, asked, "Shenlang, why are you still standing there? Why don't you go treat the princess for smallpox?" Shenlang nodded slightly and said, "There's no rush. It is already late today. We can treat her tomorrow." Swaboyu, who was just about to enter the door, heard this and couldn't help but burst out laughing. "Your Majesty, did you hear that? He doesn't even dare to enter the princess's room. I think he doesn't know how to treat smallpox at all. He's just stalling for time here. Shenlang, you better prepare to meet your end tomorrow morning." After saying this, Swaboyu entered the room and slammed the door shut. The Chan King then pointed at Shenlang and said menacingly, "I gave you a chance. If Aruhan is cured by Swaboyu tomorrow, then your end will come." After saying this, he turned and left, no longer paying him any attention. Watching the Chan King's departing figure, Shenlang turned to Wang Feng and said, "You are a woman. It's more convenient for you to care for the princess. You stay in the princess's room with Big Fool." Wang Feng was initially startled but then understood his intention. At that moment, Shenlang also whispered, "And remember, it's cold at night. Don't forget to stoke up the brazier to keep warm." At that moment, Swaboyu was carefully applying the antidote ointment to Aruhan's skin. 2 hours later, the clusters of pox on Aruhan's face and body visibly began to recede. "Now we just need to wait for the third prince to wake up after the sleeping potion wears off tomorrow morning." Just then, a voice from outside came from Luo Yan's personal maid, Master Zhua. "Shenlang went to meet the king overnight. The queen is worried he might be plotting something. She asked you to check it out." Hearing this news, Swaboyu immediately became furious. Seeing that the third prince was no longer in grave danger, he instructed the guards at the door with a few words and hurriedly followed the maid toward the palace. "Shenlang, are you trying to cause trouble behind my back again? It doesn't matter. As long as the third prince wakes up tomorrow morning, you better wash your neck and wait for death." Shortly after Swaboyu left, a straw was extended from the room next door. It reached into the third prince's isolation room. In just a moment, carbon monoxide filled the entire isolation room. Since the room was completely airtight, the third prince died painlessly in his sleep. Previously, Shenlang had mentioned a brazier to Huang Feng as a hint. The partitioning wood panels were made from freshly cut wood, so Shenlang instructed her to use fire to dry them, using the moisture in the wood to create cracks, and then using the incomplete combustion of charcoal to generate carbon monoxide, which was piped into the third prince's room. After the deed was done, the wood panels were soaked with water to close the cracks again, allowing the third prince to die in his room unnoticed. These operations were just some of the invisible murder techniques Shenlang had taught to Huang Feng and Shen 13. Time moved forward another quarter of an hour, and during this time, Shenlang was analyzing the entire process on his way to the royal palace's main hall. The timing of Aruhan's fake smallpox and Aranana's real smallpox outbreak was too coincidental. It might very well be a conspiracy trap concocted by Swaboyu Zhuoboyu to escape his predicament. His ultimate goal was the Chang King, but his unforeseen appearance became an uncontrollable factor in this plot, so he intended to eliminate him. If not mistaken, Zhuoboyu, as a pawn of the Hidden Origin Society, would use the healing of the third prince to convince the Chang King that he was the creator of divine skills, then cause the Chang King to exhibit fatal smallpox symptoms. At that time, he would tell the Chang King that only the Hidden Origin Society had this divine medicine. By then, in order to survive, the Chang King would have to agree to all the demands of the Hidden Origin Society. Although these were just Shenlang's speculations, they were quite accurate. Moments later, inside the main hall, Shenlang was actively buying time for Huang Feng. Chang King, as a future partner, I must reveal a terrible conspiracy to you. If I'm not mistaken, you contracted some unspeakable illness during your plundering in the western regions, so you hurried back to the country before completing your mission. Chang King was taken aback and gestured for him to continue. Shenlang continued, although you love women, you are very cautious. Every woman you plunder is strictly checked before you enjoy their company. Why were you so impatient this time? As Shenlang asked this question, he stared intently at Chang King, watching for his reaction. Although he had purchased this information from a palace servant through Shen 13 for a hefty price, he couldn't be sure it was entirely accurate. Sure enough, Chang King fell silent. He couldn't tell Shenlang that it was because the woman was so beautiful, so much like the Shuayin master. But he also wondered, since the woman was still a virgin, how could she have transmitted this disease to him? At that moment, Shenlang's statement broke Chang King's train of thought. Your Majesty, I now seriously suspect that your illness was orchestrated by Zhuoboyu, who has been lurking by your side and has colluded with Luo Yan, surely for some unspeakable reasons. After hearing Shenlang's words, Chang King fell into deep thought, but then he coldly said, Shenlang, when you came to my side, didn't you have any intentions? Shenlang smiled. Of course I did. As I've said before, my purpose is to ask you to help me annihilate the Su family. However, just as he said this, Zhuoboyu hurriedly ran in. Your Majesty, Shenlang is naturally deceitful, and his slanderous words should not be believed. Seeing Zhuoboyu, Shenlang breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that the plan was progressing smoothly. Huang Feng should be able to complete her task well. Thinking of this, Shenlang then said, Zhuoboyu, you know very well whether what I'm saying is true or not, don't you? At that moment, Zhuoboyu knelt down and shouted loudly, Your Majesty, there are only 2 hours left until dawn. When I arrived, the third prince's smallpox was already largely healed, and he will recover by tomorrow morning. As for Shenlang, he has not even entered the princess's isolation room, showing that he not only lacks the ability to treat smallpox, but is also afraid of being infected himself. Everything he is doing now is deceiving you. Hearing Zhuoboyu's words, Chang King found them very reasonable. Shenlang keeps saying he can treat smallpox, yet he has done nothing. Besides, I contracted that disease, and it has been Zhuoboyu treating me all along. It seems he is more reliable. With this thought, Chang King commanded, Someone, throw Shenlang out. As soon as he spoke, 2 guards stepped forward and dragged Shenlang out. Shenlang was still shouting, telling Chang King not to believe Zhuoboyu's words. His acting was perfectly explosive. However, at this moment, Zhuoboyu was still anxious. Shenlang, this little beast, is too troublesome. Although we have escaped this time, it's hard to guarantee he won't cause more trouble next time. We must act quickly to eliminate him and prevent future problems. Seeing that only the 2 of them were left in the Great Hall, Chang King suddenly pulled down his pants and said, Zhuoboyu, I was a bit vigorous in my bedroom activities today, and it's causing some pain and itchiness down there. Could you check if it has gotten worse? Suppressing his disgust, Zhuoboyu stepped forward to examine, and indeed, Chang King's area had become red and swollen, with many more blisters appearing. These were the fake smallpox viruses he had planted in Chang King's body, about to erupt. Suppressing his inner jubilation, Zhuoboyu respectfully replied, Your Majesty, please rest assured, your vital part is recovering quickly, and you will be healed soon. Moreover, while I treat the princes for smallpox and you for your hidden ailment, I have no other requests except that after the results come out tomorrow, you directly execute Shenlang on the spot. Chang King frowned upon hearing this. Although he had allowed the bet between Shenlang and Zhuoboyu, he had also promised Shui not to kill Shenlang. Moreover, it seemed the Jin family still had many treasures. Keeping Shenlang alive would ensure a continuous flow of these riches. After some thought, a sly smile appeared on his lips. Although Shenlang could not die, they could break his limbs, just keeping him alive. They could cut off one of his hands and send it to the Jin family, letting them pay to redeem it, thus torturing him while gaining wealth. This seemed like a win-win idea. The next morning, the entire Chang royal family gathered outside the palace gates, waiting to witness the overnight cure of smallpox. At that moment, Zhuoboyu shouted loudly in front of the square, His Majesty the Supreme Chang King, princes and princesses, today I, Zhuoboyu, will let everyone witness the miracle of curing smallpox overnight. After this, I will also provide more divine medicine to ensure that the Chang royal family no longer fears smallpox. Yesterday, His Majesty promised that if I cure the third prince, Shenlang will be killed. Does this still hold true? Chang King was startled, thinking, what's happening? Didn't we agree last night not to kill Shenlang? The reason Zhuoboyu said this at this moment was because he was sure that Chang King would not publicly break his promise. Shenlang Shenlang is too cunning, and even leaving him alive is a menace. He must die. As for Chang King, once his virus acts up, he'll be begging me, and then won't I have the final say? After weighing his options for a moment, Chang King finally said coldly, Zwaboyu, if you truly can cure the third prince, then you may decide Shenlang's fate. Zwaboyu then stirred up the crowd again. Princes, everyone, if the third prince can walk out unharmed later, please kill Shenlang immediately. At this point, Shenlang looked at Zwaboyu mockingly and said, Priest Zwa, what if you fail to cure the third prince? What then? Zwaboyu confidently replied, I have already sworn to His Majesty yesterday that if I fail, I will die before all the royal family members. Shenlang, satisfied, Priest Zwa, then we have an agreement. Zwaboyu inwardly sneered, it's just waiting for the third prince's drug effect to wear off, then I'll see how you die. Zwaboyu shouted confidently, Third Prince Aruhan's smallpox has healed. Let us open the gates and welcome the miracle. However, the royal family waited outside for a long time, and there was no movement inside. The atmosphere instantly turned awkwardly cold. Zwaboyu started to panic. It shouldn't be like this. The third prince's drug should have worn off by now. Did I use too much? With a puzzled heart, he walked to the door and shouted, Your Highness Third Prince, it's time to wake up. But after shouting for a long time, Aruhan on the bed still did not respond. Seeing this, two guards rushed in and ran to the bed to check. At that moment, they saw Aruhan's face was flush, his body was damp, and a strange smile appeared on his lips. One guard bravely stepped forward, shouting as he reached to touch the third prince's major artery. However, the next second, he turned to his companion with a look of horror and said, The third prince seems to have died. Hearing this, the other guard quickly ran out and informed Chang King and the others. Chang King's body shook violently, and Zwaboyu screamed, Impossible, absolutely impossible. Immediately, he disregarded any etiquette, rushed into the room, and flung himself beside Aruhan's bed. When he saw that Aruhan truly wasn't breathing, he panicked completely. How can this be? Last night the third prince was clearly better. It was just chickenpox rash. How could he die? At that moment, Chang King angrily walked to the door and shouted, Zwaboyu, what exactly is going on? Behind him, Shenlang shouted loudly, Zwaboyu, you actually killed the third prince. Don't forget, you swore to His Majesty yesterday that if you couldn't cure the third prince, you would die. Hearing Shenlang's voice, Zwaboyu suddenly thought of something, turned around, and charged at him. It was you, Shenlang. You must have sabotaged and killed the third prince. Seeing this, Shenlang quickly ducked behind Chang King and said innocently, You can eat whatever you want, but you can't just say anything. Yesterday, I didn't come near this place at all. Are you suggesting I can take a life from 100 steps away? After hearing this, Zwaboyu, furious, rushed forward and grabbed Shenlang, shouting, Even if it wasn't you, it must have been someone close to you, that tall man and that ugly woman. They must have killed the third prince and framed me. Just as he said this, a loud bang came from the nearby isolation room. The door was blown off its hinges. Through the smoke, a terrifying large hand reached out towards Zwaboyu. Arunana, covered in smallpox sores and furious, grabbed Zwaboyu and roared, Last night, I was in the next room. If someone had killed Aruhan, how could I not know? You sorcerer, not only did you cause Aruhan's death, but you dare frame such a good person as Big Fool. Since you made a vow yesterday, you should go and join Aruhan in death. By this point, Zwaboyu was terrified by Arunana's fearsome appearance and peed himself, continuously pleading with Chang King for help, insisting it was Shenlang who framed him. But everyone around him, upon seeing Arunana come out, was stunned and no one dared to help. They were all too scared and kept their distance, fearing they would catch smallpox. The next second, before Zwaboyu could scream for help again, a halberd pierced through his body, pinning him firmly to the ground. Looking at Zwaboyu's body, Shenlang felt a wave of satisfaction. It was incredibly satisfying to see his enemy killed without having to lift a finger. But now that you are dead, I suppose I must reluctantly make use of the results you produced. Thinking this, Shenlang walked up to Chang King and said, Your Majesty, the reason your two young princes recovered earlier was actually because they had a mild form of smallpox, which has a very high chance of self-recovery if their immune system can hold out. But once someone contracts the virulent smallpox, it's invariably fatal. Over these days, Chang King had seen many smallpox symptoms, and he somewhat understood what Shenlang was saying, but still asked with some distrust, Shenlang, can you really cure the smallpox and control the epidemic? Shenlang nodded. Rest assured, I will prove to you that I am the only one who can cure smallpox. Not only will I heal the princess's epidemic, but I will also save the entire Chang nation. However, I have one condition before this. Chang King was taken aback, but still patiently let him state his condition. Your Majesty Chang King, I ask you to write a letter of confession and have your envoy deliver it to the Yu Kingdom to apologize to the sovereign. Upon hearing this, Chang King immediately exploded in anger. Someone, lock Shenlang in the dungeon as a slave right now. Moments later, Shenlang was thrown into the dungeon. He appeared unconcerned. No hurry, Chang King. The so-called virulent smallpox inside you is about to erupt. I will just wait here quietly for you to come begging me to save your life. Zwaboyu, I really must thank you for this bitter fruit you planted. Not long after this, the news of Zwaboyu's death reached Luoyin. She had been so severely tormented by Chang King the previous night that she was still in too much pain to get out of bed. However, upon hearing this news, her tears tears burst forth uncontrollably because Zwoboyu had promised to take her away to a better life, escaping this misery. But now all hope was gone. It must have been Shenlang. That little beast must have killed my cousin. Enduring her severe pain, Luo Yan stood up. She was determined to find Chongqing. No matter the cost, she would kill Shenlang to avenge her cousin. After some time, Luo Yan finally made it to the Grand Hall and then tremblingly cried out, "Your Majesty, the death of the third prince was a conspiracy orchestrated by Shenlang. He also killed my brother Zwoboyu. You must seek justice for me." Chongqing was already furious about Zwoboyu causing his son's death, and hearing Luo Yan's words made him even more agitated. "If you are injured, you should just stay in bed and recover. This is not a place for you." Just as Luo Yan was about to say something else, Crown Prince Arutai hurried in. "Father, another 3,000 people died in our territory today." Chongqing's heart clenched sharply upon hearing this number. With only several 100,000 people in Chong country, the death of thousands each day meant it wouldn't be long before the nation perished. Arutai continued, "Previously, it was the old, sick, and disabled who died, but now young adults are also dying in large numbers, and even our cavalry is starting to get infected. We can't keep up with the speed of this spread. This smallpox is much more fierce than before. If we don't find a solution soon, our nation will be severely weakened." Hearing this, Luo Yan suddenly knelt down. "Your Majesty, this smallpox epidemic might be a scheme by Shenlang. He once wiped out tens of thousands of pirate King Qiu Tianwei's men in one fell swoop." Chongqing didn't respond. He certainly didn't believe that Shenlang was spreading the smallpox. This was just Luo Yan's excuse to kill Shenlang. Seeing this, Luo Yan continued, "Didn't Shenlang claim he can cure smallpox? Then let him treat Princess Arunana. If he can't cure her within 3 days, then it proves he is a fraud and should be executed by dismemberment." Hearing the suggestion of letting Shenlang treat the disease, Chongqing became furious. "This man dares to demand that I write a letter of confession to the sovereign of Yu Kingdom under the guise of treating disease. He's truly courting death." Upon hearing this, Arutai also became extremely angry and turned to go to the dungeon to pull out Shenlang's tongue, but Chongqing stopped him. "Now that Zwoboyu is dead, if Shenlang dies too, then all hope is lost. I've said it. Give him one more chance. If he doesn't withdraw his conditions by sunset, then pull out his tongue and imprison him forever in Chong country as our slave." "Alright, I am somewhat tired." Chongqing then waved his hand, signaling everyone to leave. "You all leave now. I'm going to take a nap. When the sun sets, bring Shenlang here." After hearing this, Arutai respectfully bowed and exited the Grand Hall. Just as he stepped out, he heard Chongqing's thunderous snoring behind him. How did he fall asleep so quickly? Normally, father is very energetic. Why does he seem unusually tired today? Shenlang, having demanded that Chongqing write an apology letter to the sovereign of Yu Kingdom, was thrown into the dungeon by Chongqing. As he continued to plan his next moves in his mind, suddenly, he heard familiar voices speaking the language of Yu Kingdom from the cell next door. Shenlang knew that many of the slaves in Chong country were captured from Yu Kingdom, Chu country, and the western regions. The men were taken to work in mines, and the women were used as tools for reproduction. What puzzled him was that currently, with the Su family conducting diplomacy, Chong country shouldn't be raiding Yu Kingdom anymore. So where did these people come from? With this doubt, Shenlang looked towards the opposite cell. He saw that a narrow cell was crammed with over a dozen men, the crowded space barely allowing them to turn around, let alone lie down to rest. Seeing this, Shenlang inwardly cursed Chongqing's brutality as being worse than animals, which fueled his desire to kill Chongqing even more. Suppressing his rage, he began communicating with the people in the opposite cell, only to discover they were residents from the eastern regions of the Su family's fiefdom. Learning this, Shenlang started to form some unpleasant suspicions. To confirm his guess, he continued to ask who had captured them. At this point, a middle-aged man said, "There is an evil man known as the Bandit Three-Eyed Evil. Every year, he raids and captures hundreds to thousands of people, and sells us to Chong country as slaves." With this revelation, Shenlang understood instantly. So, the raiding in Chong country had never stopped, and had just changed hands to the Bandit Three-Eyed Evil, and all this was likely a plot by the old thief Su Nan to gain political benefits, having his own men pose as bandits to raid and capture citizens, then delivering them to Chongqing in exchange for Chong country's promise not to invade Yu Kingdom. And the reason why no one in the capital city talked about this was because officials in the distant Guard Prefecture and even the heavenly Western province were covering it up. They also helped the Su family deceive these innocent people into becoming slaves in Chong country. Though Shenlang was no saint, he could not tolerate such treachery by these scoundrels against their own people. "Su family, since you can be so utterly unscrupulous, then wait for me, Shenlang, to act as the arm of heaven and exterminate your clan." In the evening, Crown Prince Arutai arrived at the dungeon. On seeing Shenlang, his gaze turned icy. "It seems you are the Yu Kingdom man who made my father write that letter of confession. Take him out and bring him to see my father." Moments later, Arutai escorted Shenlang to the Great Hall. At this time, Chongqing was still fast asleep on his throne, while Luo Yan had been kneeling there all afternoon. Arutai frowned, feeling something was off, but he respectfully approached and said, "Father, I have brought Shenlang here." Startled by the noise, Chongqing suddenly woke up and saw the darkened Great Hall, realizing the sun had set. Even after having slept, Chang King still felt very uncomfortable. Suppressing his discomfort, he barked at Shenlang. Shenlang, you dare be so bold as to make this king write a letter of confession. Shenlang, if you kneel and apologize to me now and cure Runana, I will forgive you. Otherwise, I will make your life worse than death. Luo Yan added, if you can't cure Princess Runana within 3 days, it will prove you've lied and deceived His Majesty, and you will face death. Just as he finished speaking, Chang King felt increasingly dizzy and irritable. Angrily, he commanded, it's so dark in here. Why has no one lit the fire yet? As the guards were lighting the fire, Urutai drew his sword from his waist, pulled Shenlang towards him, and held the blade to him, saying fiercely, Father, let's not waste words with him. Let me take action now and punish this disrespectful man from your kingdom. However, before he could finish, Urutai was shocked by the sight of Chang King. Luo Yan was frightened, falling back as she retreated and kept muttering, so many blisters. Seeing everyone's reaction to his appearance, Chang King panicked and quickly ordered a mirror to be brought over. When he saw his reflection, he was stunned. His body was covered in dense blisters, looking utterly disgusting. These symptoms were even worse than the most severe cases of smallpox in Chang country. Chang King went nearly mad. Is this monstrous figure in the mirror really me? Is this the legendary, invariably fatal, virulent smallpox? I can't die. I still have countless women and endless wealth to enjoy. I can't bear to die. Someone quickly calls Zwaboyu to treat my smallpox. Urutai helplessly responded, Zwaboyu is already dead. At this moment, Shenlang, who had been observing Chang King's frantic behavior from the side, felt a surge of secret pleasure. The herpes virus that Zwaboyu had implanted in Chang King's body had finally erupted, and it seemed it was time for Shenlang to act. Suddenly, Chang King felt an excruciating headache, and the intense dizziness made him unable to stand any longer, causing him to collapse. What followed was a wave of severe nausea. He almost vomited his meal. What to do? Who could save him now? Suddenly, he thought of Shenlang and quickly scrambled up, pleading with Shenlang. Shenlang, aren't you able to cure smallpox? I'll give you anything you want. Just treat me, please. Shenlang smiled and said, Your Majesty, I indeed have the divine medicine for smallpox. But now, to treat you, I require not one condition, but two. At this point, Chang King, desperate to survive, could only suppress his rage and let Shenlang set his terms. Shenlang pointed at Luo Yan and said, First, kill this woman. She has tried every means to kill me, and I do not want her present during your treatment. She might find a way to sabotage my efforts from behind. Only by killing her can I focus fully. Hearing this, Luo Yan was shocked. Your Majesty, this Shenlang is a swindler. You must not believe his slander. Shenlang scoffed and continued, Your Majesty, Luo Yan is just a woman you seized, and her dealings with Zwaboyu were indeed unclean, which has surely troubled your mind. As for my medical skills, you could inquire about who cured the demoness Chiu Yaoer's strange disease, and the princesses Ning Luo and Ning Yan of Yu Kingdom, who had diseases no one else could cure. Who cured them? It was all thanks to my superior medical skills. After Shenlang's speech, Chang King truly believed him without doubt and turned a cold gaze towards Luo Yan. Wretched woman, tell me, is this smallpox that I contracted a deliberate plot by you and that sorcerer Zwaboyu to harm me? After saying this, he strode towards her. Seeing this, Luo Yan was terrified and wanted to flee, but her legs seemed nailed to the spot, unable to move. She cried out in panic, Your Majesty. At that moment, Chang King grabbed Luo Yan by the neck and lifted her high. Then, with a snap, the two pawns of the Hidden Origin Society were completely eliminated. Afterward, Chang King discarded Luo Yan like trash and turned to Shenlang, speaking ingratiatingly, Can you treat my smallpox? Shenlang shook his finger and said, Of course not yet. You still need to write a letter of confession and have it sent to the Yu Kingdom capital city as quickly as possible. Upon hearing this, Chang King exploded in anger again. Crown Prince Urutai drew his sword, intending to cut off Shenlang's tongue as punishment. Unexpectedly, Shenlang then shouted sharply, Your Majesty, your Crown Prince is so intent on preventing me from treating you, he wants you dead. This statement immediately aroused Chang King's suspicion. Shenlang was right. If he died, then Urutai would become the new Chang King. Moreover, he had already contracted smallpox once and would not be infected again. He angrily accused Urutai, Urutai, do you want me dead? Get out. After Urutai left, Chang King turned to Shenlang and said, I agree to write the confession, but if your treatment doesn't work tonight, I will make you regret ever being born. He then ordered someone to bring paper and ink and wrote the confession. Shenlang's first task was thus completed. After securing the letter, Shenlang told Chang King, Please prepare a clean room. We'll start the treatment immediately. Moments later, Shenlang entered the prepared room, first drawing a taiji diagram on the floor with lime powder, then lighting incense made from nicotine grass as an offering. With these mystical seeming actions, Chang King and his son suddenly felt that Shenlang might indeed be much more powerful than Zwaboyu. Seeing their reaction, Shenlang couldn't help but smirk internally. Do you like the scent of this nicotine grass? Soon, Shenlang will lead you through the gates to a new world.